Oh, hello everyone. Welcome back. No drink, just drinking tea. It's cold outside. It's like sleet, which is crap. But this is Kings and Generals. I'm late on this one. I wanted to release it earlier in the week, and I'm recording it now, and it's Thursday. This is Battle for Dutch East Indies, Pacific War number 8. So let's just get into it. And this is a good series. I really do like it. I hope everyone else does, because I'm doing them.
After an entire month of fighting, and with both Malaya and the Philippines thrown against the ropes, the time had finally come for the final step of the Japanese advance. Now, the Dutch East Indies, the final link in their planned defensive chain across the Pacific, stood open for a Japanese attack. And as the Japanese prepared to execute one of their most bold and brilliant plans of invasion, the Malayan and Philippine fronts saw the start of strong Allied resistance. It is never too late for gifts, and the sponsor of this video, Established Titles, provides a unique way to give a present to your loved ones. Established Titles is a project based on a medieval Scottish custom of referring to the land. The year of
I am also still surprised, because a lot of this stuff about Japan I didn't know. I mean, obviously Pearl Harbor, like obviously all the details I didn't know. But man, I still can't believe how active they were and how strategically they were just attacking. It's very impressive. And I can see why now I respect the Pacific War, after the fall of Germany and stuff like that. I can see why they were saying, okay, now we're going to the Pacific, now we're facing Japan. And I understand why there was this kind of, all right guys, here we go. It makes, if you watch Band of Brothers, you can see why, they were like, well, look, if we're going to go, we just want to get it over with. And just this thought of, it's not going to be easier. I'm not going to say it'd be harder. By then, it probably wouldn't have been as hard because they had wasted a lot of resources. But still, I apologize for all this talking, but I'm just paying respects to Japan for just the fighting that they were able to do. I'm going to shut up now, sorry.
1842 didn't start as a normal and regular year for the Dutch. Their homeland, ravaged by war, was under the occupation of enemy Germans. Their government and their queen were in exile, helping the Allies in any manner they could, and their most important colony had become a target for Japanese expansion. But this colony was not defenseless at all, as Lieutenant General Heinter Porten counted with around 85,000 soldiers, with most of them concentrated at the island of Java. The Dutch also counted with a sizable naval force of 5 cruisers, 8 destroyers, 12 submarines, and 56 other ships, under the command of Lieutenant Admiral Conrad Helfrich, nicknamed Ship-a-Day Helfrich because he sank more Japanese ships in the first weeks of the war than the entire British or American navies together.
Wow!
It's worth mentioning that Helfrich's small force of submarines was a formidable opponent for the Japanese Navy, sinking several of their ships, as we've seen in the previous weeks. Dutch.
Damn. The Japanese must have hated him. Oh, they wanted to kill that guy so bad.
Air power was an important threat as well, having around 500 aircraft at their disposal, from which some 300 were front-line aircraft. These were based on several secret airfields scattered around the East Indies, such as Samarinda II or Singkawang II, to where Dutch planes would be transferred in case of war, trying to prevent their destruction by a Japanese air attack. These airfields were, however, quickly discovered by the invaders, then becoming vital strategic objectives and easy prey for Japanese bombers. For the invasion of the Dutch East Indies, the Japanese plan stipulated that they first needed to secure footholds on Malaya and the Philippines. After this was achieved, the Japanese would then launch an amphibious invasion of Borneo, making it the stepping stone from which to launch the invasion of the East Indies. Absolute coordination was essential for this operation, especially since the Indies were the most important target of the Japanese offensives due to its richness in petroleum oil, rubber, nickel, tin, scrap iron, and other strategic resources. The 16th Army, under Lieutenant General Imamura Hitoshi, was appointed by the commander of the Southern Expeditionary Army Group, General Hisaichi Terauchi, to carry out the invasion of the East Indies, supported by the 3rd Air Force once their operations in Malaya had concluded. Originally, this army was composed of the 2nd Division and the Sakaguchi Detachment, which took part in the conquests of Davao and Jolo, but Tokyo had also already planned for the 38th and 48th Divisions, as well as the South Seas Detachment and many other units, to be assigned to the 16th Army, as the capture of Hong Kong, the Philippines, Malaya, Guam, and Rabaul progressed. Initially supporting the invasion of the Philippines, the 3rd Fleet of Admiral Takahashi and its 11th Air Fleet were also appointed to support the Dutch East Indies campaign. The plan for the 16th Army was to launch a series of naval invasions against key points in the Dutch East Indies, namely some of the secret airfields that we've discussed, as the Japanese would need air support from these points for their planned invasion of Java. This plan, drafted by the leading commanders of the 3rd Fleet, was very specific about where and when each unit would carry out the invasion operations. After securing Davao and Jolo, the Sakaguchi Detachment would land on Tarakan Island around the 33rd day after the start of the war, then launching an invasion of Balikpapan 10 days later. Once Balikpapan was in Japanese hands, General Sakaguchi would naval invade Banjarmasin around the 53rd day, before finally landing on Bali some 16 days later. Meanwhile, after taking
just their plans are
planning a family? Check
No.
your sperm count.
What?
You can test it in your room.
I'm not testing it.
Morning, night, or afternoon.
What I do on my own time is none of your concern, pal.
Meanwhile, after taking Hong Kong, 2 battalions of the 38th Division would assemble in Palau to seize Ambon and then attack Kupang on Timor Island, while the rest of the division would be appointed to launch the invasion of southern Sumatra. Finally, the main...
Why are they picking certain islands? Are those maybe for the best way to what am I trying to say? To dock in? They have the best ports, and is it a cutoff, like a strategic landing point, where now you've cut off the 2 forces and you land here? Did they explain all that and I just completely missed it? I was just blown away at where they were going. Because if so, I'm stupid, and you shouldn't be watching me. I wouldn't even watch me. I don't even watch my videos, so I don't know why you're watching.
force of this army would execute the invasion of the island of Java.
Operation J.
The 2nd Division would be responsible for the landings in Western Java, while the 48th Division would take charge of the invasion of Eastern Java. The 3rd Fleet's Sasebo Force of SNLF Marines and Yokosuka Force of Paratroopers would also be responsible for the subsequent capture of Manado, Kandari, and Makassar in the Celebes, while also assisting in the operations against Timor.
Okay, hold on. You're assuming that this capture is going to go easy. To be able to go down here and capture this, which is also going to be easy. To be able to go over here and go down here. It seems like they're asking an awful lot. I mean, I noticed it with this one. And like this... Look, I'm not questioning it because I don't understand it. They know what they're doing.
By January 3rd, with the rapid advances in the Malayan and Philippine fronts, and with the successful capture of British Borneo, the Japanese command finally felt ready to start the Dutch East Indies campaign. On January 6th, Takahashi's fleet arrived in Davao, where the Sakaguchi detachment had already concentrated. The following day, the invasion force departed Malalag Bay, heading towards Tarakan Island in Dutch Borneo. They were escorted by a fleet consisting of 9 destroyers and a light cruiser, under the command of Rear Admiral Nishimura Shoji. Meanwhile, the Dutch had a garrison of around 1,400 men in Tarakan, led by Lieutenant Colonel Simon de Waal. This force had prepared defensive positions, expecting a Japanese attack to the west, yet they were to be surprised. On January 10th, Dutch reconnaissance detected the Japanese convoy en route to Tarakan, so de Waal ordered the destruction of all oil installations on the island. He also sent some bombers to disrupt the landings, but to no avail, as by the early hours of January 11th, after the official declaration of war on the Netherlands, some SNLF Marines and Sakaguchi's main force had already landed north of the Amal River. They then marched south to the mouth of the river under a burning red sky, where they stormed and outflanked some Dutch pillboxes. A battalion of the Sakaguchi detachment also landed further south at Tanjuang Bateau to capture the Linkas oil fields. This unit tried to advance through the jungle, but was slowed down by the extremely dense vegetation. Sakaguchi also lost communications with them, so the Japanese general didn't know of their whereabouts. At the same time, aided by a Japanese guide who knew the area, Sakaguchi's main force broke through the jungle and got to the north side of the Tarakan oil field by midday. As the Japanese advanced north of the Tarakan oil field, the Dutch bombarded them with artillery and mortars far from Saraba's support point. The Dutch and Japanese made several simultaneous offensives against each other, but eventually the Japanese landed a series of night raids, and Yamamoto's troops managed to capture both lines of Dutch barracks. The defenders had also lost many men, and their communications with the coastal batteries were breaking down. This left de Waal with no choice but to capitulate on the morning of January 12th.
Oh.
Yet without communications, some Dutch units were still fighting on. One of these units was the Karaengan Battery, which came into contact with the Japanese battalion that had lost communications around noon. Yet despite the sustained attack, the Karaengan Battery accurately shot and sunk 2 Japanese minesweepers and 1 landing craft.
Oh.
The battery was finally captured on January 13th, subjected to the Japanese's vengeance for the loss of their minesweepers, who then executed most of its crew. Sakaguchi had lost only 7 men in the entire battle, while the IJN lost around 250 men, mainly in the destroyed minesweepers. In contrast, the Dutch lost around 300 men, with the rest ending up captured. The same day that the Sakaguchi detachment was landing on Tarakan, Rear Admiral Takagi Takeo started the IJN operation in the Celebes. An invasion fleet under Rear Admiral Tanaka Raizo, consisting of 3 cruisers and 11 destroyers, escorted the Sasebo force, consisting of 3,200 SNLF Marines, while some 762 paratroopers from the Yokosuka force prepared to be dropped onto the Langoan airfield. The main force of Sasebo would land around Manado to envelop the Dutch defenders and capture the town, with another force of 1,400 SNLF Marines also landing at Kema to help the paratroopers secure the airfield. In the Celebes, Colonel
About 2 years ago, I realized that Jade was overweight. I wish I would have introduced the fresh food a lot sooner. After Farmer's Dog, she's a much healthier weight.
Shut up. Shut up. No one cares. Shut up.
In the Celebes, Colonel Marinus Voren had substantial forces under his command, spread across 3 major areas: Manado, Kendari, and Makassar. Manado was defended by around 1,500 men, under Major Ben Schilmuller, mainly from the National Reserve Battalion. In the early morning of January 11th, the Sasebo force came ashore at Manado and Kume, repulsing a small number of Dutch units and heading towards the Langoan airfield. A couple of hours later, the Yokosuka force was dropped on Langoan, where the paratroopers managed to completely seize the airfield. In response to the strong Japanese attack, the defenders retreated to Tinor, where they were finally crushed by the SNLF Marines by noon. With the fall of Manado, Tomohon, and Tondano, Schilmuller had decided by night to retreat with most of his forces to the west, towards Amurang, where he would commence guerrilla warfare. The following day, the Japanese parachuted a company of reinforcements to Manado. Soon all the Japanese forces made contact at Langowan and captured the city. With Schilmöller's retreat, some scattered Dutch units also started to wage guerrilla warfare, so the Dutch formed in total 5 guerrilla groups operating separately. This paratroop operation at Manado was the first ever carried out by Japanese forces, and it was a complete success.
Yeah, it was.
The Sasebo force would finally remain in Manado until January 16th to carry out mopping up operations, although most of the guerrilla groups would manage to escape them. The successful capture of Tarakan and Manado signified the start of the Dutch East Indies campaign, and this was something that deeply concerned the ABDA command. Yet this week, the Allies had their hands already full in some other regions. In the Philippines, for instance, fighting started in the Abacay Line back on January 9th, when General Homma sent the 65th Independent Mixed Brigade and the 7th Tank Regiment to push south on the East Road and break through the 2nd Corps' positions. Facing the Japanese attack were General Parker's 41st and 51st Divisions, as well as the elite 57th Regiment of Philippine Scouts. These defenders quickly rushed to rain heavy artillery fire over the Japanese advance, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. At the same time, the Japanese 122nd Regiment.
That's the first time so far in this entire video the Japanese seem to have stopped. Everything has just been going. They're just, and I'm not trying to knock the Dutch East Indies military. I know it's not the best in the world at this time, but I'm just amazed at how just devastating the Japanese military is. I am truly just blown away. Wow.
Moved west towards the 1st Corps area and captured the town of Olongapo. The following day, the main attack began against the Abacay Line as the Japanese forces advanced upon the western sector of the line. To bolster the morale of his troops, General MacArthur himself decided to visit the front lines, although this would be his only trip to Bataan during the battle. Despite the progress of the Japanese advance, the heavy bombardment carried out by the American defenders forced Lieutenant General Nara Akira of the 65th Independent Mixed Brigade to push his forces further west. On the night of January 11th, the first Japanese units started to cross the Calagueman River against the positions of the 57th Regiment. The Philippine Scouts resisted attack after attack from Nara's forces, executing well-planned counterattacks that always managed to regain most of the lost territory. Parker also saw the difficult situation in which his troops were, and so he decided to reinforce them with his reserves. Elsewhere in the center of the line, though, the Japanese had successfully pushed back the 41st Division, and in the far western sector, the battered 51st Division was being attacked repeatedly, which left it very close to completely crumbling. Furthermore, on January 15th,
Apologies. I thought the 9th Regiment, when they moved, I thought they were going to try to move and then turn on the flank. But maybe they don't, well, maybe they don't know if there's something else out here. No, they probably, I don't know. Because if there was something else out here, I would have them turn on their flank. Flank, military term.
Nara found a seam between the 41st and 51st Divisions, and quickly set out to exploit his newfound opportunity.
No.
Parker ordered a counterattack early on January 16th, which managed to push back the Japanese a little bit. Yet Nara saw this coming and planned to envelop the Filipino troops once they had advanced. This left the 51st completely exposed and rapidly collapsing. That same day, the 122nd Regiment moved south towards Morong, where its advance was finally stopped by the 26th Cavalry Regiment. Despite their successful horse-mounted charge, which would be the last US cavalry regiment to engage in horse-mounted warfare, General Wainwright had no other choice but to withdraw on January 17th. Due to the lack of food, they would end up butchering their mounts to survive and convert into 2 squadrons, one motorized rifle squadron and a mechanized squadron. Back on the Abacay line,
God damn.
Can an 8,000-year-old herb really increase your T, lower your body fat, and maximize your bedroom performance? Clinical trials say absolutely. Over 3,000 testimonials from all over the world have been flooding in our...
I like how the skip now was always invisible at first.
Back on the Abaque line, MacArthur sent the Philippine Division and his last reserves to plug the gap left by the 51st Division. If this position fell, then his entire main battle position might disintegrate in the blink of an eye. But would the Americans be successful? We'll have to wait until next week to see.
Oh.
For now, we turn to Malaya, where the Indian defenders were still retreating towards Johor to establish new defensive positions. The 8th Australian Division of General Bennett had already moved to the area around Segamat, and they would be joined by the 9th Indian Division and the recently arrived 45th Brigade to form West Force under the command of Bennett himself. Their task was to stop the Japanese advance at Johor, while at the same time giving the Indian forces enough time to rest and replenish. Meanwhile, General Yamashita planned to threaten the British defence by landing a strong force at Endau on the southeastern coast of Malaya. He also wanted to give his tired 5th Division enough time to rest at Seremban, while maintaining the Imperial Guards Division's advance along the coast. On the evening of January 11th, Kuala Lumpur was occupied by the Japanese, and by January 13th, the Indians were withdrawing through West Force. The following day, the Australians were planning to execute an ambush led by Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Blackjack Galligan west of the Gemmas to finally stop the Japanese momentum. Bennett had placed his Australian brigades on the expected main area of Japanese advance, supported by anti-tank units and 4 artillery regiments. On the afternoon of January 14th, an advance unit of the 5th Division fell into the trap. As a result, the Japanese suffered heavy casualties and were forced to retreat.
Wow.
Yet despite the success of the Australian ambush, by dawn on the next day, the Imperial Guards Division of Lieutenant General Nishimura Takuma was approaching the Moa area on the coast, which was protected by the 45th Brigade. Nishimura sent 1 battalion through the Moa River to flank both the town and the Indian defenders, while his main force was advancing from the north. On the night of January 15th, Japanese soldiers landed on the south bank of the river, facing almost no resistance, and by January 16th, they had outflanked and routed an entire Indian company. The remaining Indian defenders were then cut off and captured by Nishimura's forces, who then continued upstream towards the town of Moa. Australian artillery managed to stop their advance there, but some Japanese soldiers had already crossed the river and were decimating the remaining Indian defenders. By night, the 45th Brigade had been virtually destroyed, and both Moa and its harbour had fallen into Japanese hands.
Jesus.
Australian forces at Gemas had also been attacked by the Japanese on January 15th, repulsing 3 attacks before finally being flanked and forced to retreat by the 17th. The loss of Gemas had deprived the Australians of much equipment, while the fall of Moa had left a critical hole in the communications of West Force. The Allied command knew that they needed to hold the Japanese advance there if they wanted to have a real chance at holding Johor. Back on January 13th, the British had received their second reinforcement, the 53rd Brigade of the still coming 18th British Division. This brigade didn't have sufficient time for recuperating after being at sea for 11 weeks, yet General Percival decided to send it anyway to stop the Japanese at Moa. This was a critical point in the battle and in the defense of Malaya, but this is also the end of the week, so we have to leave you here for now.
That was good. Man, Japan is devastating. It's impressive. Well, I'm going to end this here. Like and subscribe. I'm going to go get some more tea. And you can stop watching now.